swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone.
Yes!
It is bedlam at the bank.
Look at the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way rocks the baby in his face and slams up. And the doctor made a sensational play. Oh, in front, the front, and they score! And Giroux's got it. Busted. Fires. Blasted goal! Brady back again. He steps up, he's dead, and falls forward. And he fumbles the football, and the Eagles have it.
We welcome you to the Philly Sports Hour here on a nice Saturday, mid-May already. It's crazy. Memorial Day weekend is next weekend. It's absurd. A lot going on in the sports world. A lot going on with PGA right now, with Scotty Scheffler and all the stuff that happened on Friday. But we're going to talk about the best team in baseball today. And that's the Philadelphia Phillies, 32-14. They got another win against Washington yesterday, series win over the New York Mets throughout the week. And joining me to talk about them is from Crossing Broad, Bob Wankel. Bob, how are we?
What's up, man? Good to talk to you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good day. It's always good when we're talking about a really good team like the Phillies, who are just playing complete baseball right now. They have MLB's second best ERA. They lead the MLB in runs per game. They have 32 wins, which is the most in baseball. They didn't get 30 wins until last. They didn't win 30 games till June 8th of last year. It just shows you how much this team is just so good.
Yeah, they are. They're a complete team. They can beat in a lot of different ways. The starting pitchers can win games on their own. Starting pitching has a night off. The bullpen is good enough, and there's enough high leverage arms out there that they can carry for 4 or 5 innings if they need to. And then obviously, you just said the offense leads baseball in runs per game. They slug. They hit for average. They can steal bases. It really is a complete team.
And you hear a complete team, and the first thing you think about is the Los Angeles Dodgers, who, how in the world do the Phillies have scored more runs than them? From Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, the pitching, Tyler Glasnow. Everyone thinking they would be the best team. Obviously, they're still a complete great team, but the Phillies, it just shows you what is going on here.
Well, I think that there's two things. When you look at the Dodgers, if you watch them play consistently, obviously the first 4 or 5 guys in that lineup are unbelievable. They're as good as anybody, but there is a little bit of a drop-off after that. When you get to the bottom third of that lineup, it kind of does weaken. Now, you could say the same about the Phillies. Johan Rojas has certainly been inconsistent. Nick Castellanos has had his struggles. So it's not like 1 through 9, the Phillies are firing on all cylinders. But what they've had is really this incredible balance where it seems like 2 or 3 guys, once they fall off, another 2 or 3 guys really pick it up. So when you go up and down that lineup collectively, they really have been a threat at any given time. And, I think that the other part of it is, right, like I was talking to, Anthony Sanfilippo, who I work with at Crossing Broad, and we were having a conversation about this before yesterday's game. This team was brought back after a horrible disappointment last fall, and they know the opportunity that they let slip away. And when the Phillies this past offseason said, we're basically going to run it back, obviously there's a couple tweaks here and there with Merrifield, but by and large, this is the same team. And I think that this team is supremely motivated. They wanted to get off to a good start. They wanted to prove a point. And I think that they realized that this is really their last opportunity as an entire group to get this done. Certainly a lot of key guys are going to be back next season and beyond, but this group as assembled, they know they have a special opportunity in front of them, and they are really playing like every game matters right now.
And they sure are. And that's when you look at kind of winning the division. You've seen the debates back and forth. Do you want the week off? Or there's that trouble with team. We've seen it in the NL. It's been horrible. In the AL, a team has won the World Series doing it. Where do you stand? Do you want to win this division, or do you want that wild card so you can keep the routine, keep going?
I tend to kind of think that there is something to be said for a team that's playing well, and then they have their momentum halted. They shut down, obviously, and they have to amp back up, and the Braves have been a victim of that. But a lot of that is circumstantial, too. I think that you can look at what's happened the past couple of years. It's still a small sample size. I don't know that you can definitively say, like, winning the wild card is definitely the way to go. In fact, I would say that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, your luck is eventually probably going to run out. So the fact that I can eliminate any doubt, maybe not have to play in that first round, automatically advance, like I'm still going to take that opportunity anytime I can get it. The Phillies have benefited from being able to win early in series on the road and then kick it back to Citizens Bank Park for the knockout blow the past couple postseasons, obviously the Arizona series notwithstanding. And they've benefited from that, but I think that this team with home field advantage, knowing what they've been through, the experience they have, I would bank on trying to win the division. And if nothing else, compete for the division. You know, you don't want to see a scenario where it's August, September, you're 10 games out, and you're running back that same like, all right, let them have the division. We'll win our 91 games or 90 games and sneak in, and it'll be fine. I want to see this team keep its foot on the gas and kind of show the rest of the sport that, you know, these weren't two little miracle runs these past two seasons. Like, we really are one of the elite teams in this sport.
And I mean, you say the 91 wins. Well, they're on pace for what? 113, 112?
Yeah,
obviously, it's not realistic, but.
Yeah. Well, you never know. I mean, look, the schedule will get harder. I know a lot of Phillies fans are sitting here saying, I don't want to hear about the schedule. And they should dismiss that. I mean, look, you play who you play and you beat up on teams that you should beat up on. And if you're going to be a 100-plus win team, that's how you do it. I mean, that's how you get to 100-plus wins, by taking care of business against teams that you should beat. And they have been wildly good at it so far. And I think that it's realistic to expect this team to win 100 games. You know, 113, I think, is probably a little bit ambitious. But when it's all said and done, does this team, with the start it's had, have enough juice to win 100-plus games? I think that that's not unrealistic.
I agree with you. But the thing with the schedule is a lot of people have been debating it. They made this equal schedule for everybody, that everyone plays the same teams. Everyone plays everybody. Of course, the AL plays more AL than NL, but whatever. The Braves last night hosted the San Diego Padres and lost. The Phillies were in San Diego and swept them. Hypocritical from the Braves?
Yeah, look, I mean, Atlanta has a good team, but you just see the Braves fans online, right? Like, if you really get like deep into baseball Twitter, and you just see everybody complaining about the Phillies schedule, like, oh, look, another sub-500 team, another sub-500 team. But if you go and cross-reference that, common opponents, and see how the Phillies have performed against the same teams Atlanta's played, you know, Phillies stack up very favorably. So, to your point, I think way too much gets made of the schedule. I think that independent of who they're playing and who their opponent is, you see why the Phillies are so good and how deep they are. I mean, look, right now they're playing without a guy who for the first 5 weeks of the season was arguably their best player. And you know, with Trey Turner out of the lineup here, and they just haven't missed a beat. They're winning roughly 80% of their games since he's been out of the lineup. So, you know, a lot of teams that would cripple them. So for what the Phillies have been able to do and for as resilient and deep as they've been, I just think, you know, it's when you're not a Phillies fan or you don't like the Phillies, it's what you do is you always want to poke holes in what the accomplishment's been. But objectively speaking, I mean, they've been just so impressive.
They have been. And you mentioned Trey Turner, someone that has stepped up big time and been ultra impressive. They gave out his bobblehead last night, and that's Bryson Stott. Yeah. This past week, this is from a few days ago, but his slash line's 476, 594, 810 with 9 RBIs. I'm sure he has more from then, because that was, I think I wrote this before Thursday night's game. He's been unbelievable.
He really has been. And I think that the biggest thing with Bryson Stott at this point is just the patience that he's shown. Like, if you go back and look at what he did last season, it was obviously a big jump from his rookie year. There's no question about it. Like, he took a big step forward. Phillies tried to hit him lead off at times. They tried to hit him in the 2-hole at times. And you're looking at it and you're like, all right, I think that this guy could potentially be a top of the order player or a top of the order hitter. The problem was, though, it was all about hits. Like, there wasn't a walk tool there. He wasn't as selective. He's really been more selective, especially on pitches outside of the strike zone this year. And right now, I mean, he's on pace to walk 85 times this season, a year after he walked only 39 times. And so if he's able to more than double that walk rate and that walk output, then all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that might be able to hit 280, 290 for you, draw 80-plus walks, and that, by definition, is a top of the order hitter. Now, they don't need to hit him up there, but that just shows what his ceiling could be moving forward.
Yeah, they only have a few years left of Schwarber. I don't want to jump ahead 2 years, but could you see Stott move up in that one hole?
Yeah, I mean, if he continues to be that type of player, he has a little bit more speed, obviously, and everyone around here loves to talk about Schwarber in the leadoff spot, and he doesn't profile as a traditional leadoff type guy, and okay, that's fine. But yeah, moving forward, is there a world where he hits leadoff? Yeah, I think that that's possible. Again, though, you always caution, especially at this point in the season. It's still early. It doesn't feel that early. It's not that early, but could there be a decline where, he is not this guy that's going to pace for 85 walks? Yeah, sure. But if that continues and there's a progression in his game to that degree, then yeah, I think that you could absolutely look at analytics. You could really build out your ideal lineup and say, yeah, he can definitely handle this.
I'm looking at these Bryson Stott stats on the right side of my screen. And the more I look at it and the more I watch him on the field, the more I'm reminded of, I didn't get the prime years of this, but the more I'm reminded of Chase Utley. And because they both kind of have that short swing. Stott's also starting to hit for a little more power. And Utley was a real 5-tool guy. And so is Bryson Stott is starting to turn into one. Do you see that at all?
I do, to a degree. I think that the biggest resemblance for me is that both guys, as good as Chase Utley was, and people are going to remember him for winning a World Series, and you just open up Baseball Reference and you look at his statistics in his prime years, there was a short stretch of time where he was out of this world. Bryson Stott has not risen to that level yet, but I think that the biggest similarity that I see is just a knack for the moment. I've been really big on this the past couple seasons, and I think it was obvious early on in his career, even when he was struggling to a degree. The moment was never too big for him. You go back to the 22 World Series, he did struggle. But leading up to that, he had several key hits and really big moments for that team. And then last year, I think you saw that even more. There were numerous times late in games where he would deliver a clutch hit. And Chase Utley had that gene, and he played the game hard. He was super productive, and that's great. But I think that the thing that set Chase Utley apart from others was just that he always handled the moment well. And that's what you're seeing from a kid that's only in his third year right now. And I think that that's something that you can really lean into and be excited about.
And Stott's been big in these last few games, especially against the Mets. He had the game-tying homer against Edwin Diaz. A few days later, he got the game-tying hit that ended up being in a loss. But that has really shown this year from Bryson. And another guy who's filled in for Trey as well has been Edmundo Sosa, who's hitting over 300 this year.
Yeah, Edmundo Sosa's done a nice job. And he had some extended run last season and did a nice job for him. I think that the thing that you have to kind of safeguard against a little bit with Edmundo is just the overexposure element of it. When he gets opportunities and I don't want to say limited, I just don't think he's a guy that you want to see out there 6 days a week in an ideal world. But when he gets opportunities in small doses and gets favorable matchups, he's pretty good. He's fairly shorthanded defensively, especially at shortstop. And he has been a very, very productive hitter for this team this season. He's a big reason why they have not missed a beat with Trey Turner out of the lineup. And it's somewhat surprising because when you brought Whit Merrifield into the fold, the whole narrative coming in was, hey, this is a guy that was an all-star last year. He's a good major league player. He didn't finish well, but overall, if they need a guy to replace someone for a lengthy amount of time, it's going to be Whit Merrifield. He's a pro's pro. He said coming in, I'm going to force Rob Thompson to get me into this lineup. So we thought he'd play a little left field, a little second base, maybe a little in the infield, third base. And he just hasn't really been that guy for them. That has not worked out as planned. So it's been even more important that Edmundo Sosa has been as good as he's been. So, yeah, he's been a godsend for the Phillies.
Yeah, he sure has. Someone else that has been is Mr. Ranger Suarez. And the guy is this year, 59 innings pitched. He's 8-0, a 1.37 ERA, 58 strikeouts, a .76 whip, a 2.5 WAR. He's the third lowest ERA in baseball, the lowest whip, the third lowest batting average against, the third most innings pitched, the most wins. He's the fifth Phillies starter over the last 100 seasons to start 8-0. He's the only other Phillies lefty in team history to win. The only other, if this happens, it'll be the only other Phillies lefty in team history to win 10 straight games was lefty.
Yeah.
Is that possible that he could do that, win those 10 straight? And just how unbelievable is Ranger Suarez?
Yeah, right now, I mean, it's I wouldn't bet against him. The other night he wasn't even particularly sharp in his last start against the Mets, and he still doesn't allow an earned run through 5 innings. That's kind of the bar that he has set for himself right now, where he was not fantastic, and you're like, oh, he still didn't even give up an earned run. He wasn't helped by the Phillies defense in that game a couple times. And that probably cost him another inning into that start. He might get through 6 if he's a little bit more efficient with his pitches and gets helped out by the defense too. And he's battling conditions and all of the other different elements of that start. But right now, I mean, you look at the NL Cy Young odds. He's 4th overall. He's behind Zach Wheeler, Shoto Imanaga, and Tyler Glasnow. And he's thrown the ball as well as any of those guys. You go through and pull up every key statistical category for National League starting pitchers, and he's either at the top or within the top 3 or 4. He has been phenomenal. We've known for years. We hear Rob Thompson all the time talk about it when we ask him, what sets him apart. He mentions the slow heartbeat, the moment's never too big. Obviously saw he got the final out of the NLCS in 22. We've known that he's versatile. We know that he can handle big situations, but the thing that we've never seen was the consistency from him. He's put together months where he's really been great, but then it's followed by a bad month or a stint where he's not getting deep into games. And this year he's been able to put it all together. He had a full off season. He was at camp on time. He's been healthy, and it's really all come together for him.
Yeah, no, you mentioned Wheeler in there. He was excellent Friday night against Washington, who he particularly struggles against that. So he's 7 1/3. I think he allowed 2 runs. He was really good. I mean, the Nationals lineup isn't great, but it was encouraging after some mess starts from him.
Yeah, Nationals lineup actually is it's not great, but it's not bottom feeder either. They put the ball in play. They've got a couple young, intriguing players. The Nationals are slowly coming back to respectability. They've been in a lot of games this year. Even last night, they fall behind early, and you think, oh, the Phillies are going to drop the hammer on these guys, and they kind of just linger around. And they're a solid team. Zach obviously did not have a very good start against the Marlins on Sunday, and it was almost unbelievable. I mean, he set this bar. Again, like Ranger Suarez, where you expect dominance every time the guy takes the ball. And of course, over the span of 32 starts, you're not going to be perfect every time out. But last night was more of what you expect to see from him. And frankly, much like I just referenced in Ranger Suarez's last start, where he wasn't really helped out by his defense, I think Johan Rojas cost him a run early on last night in the 2nd inning. There was a ball that was hit out towards left center field. Rojas was very aggressive in going to get the ball. It doesn't make the play. It gets by him. If he takes more of a conservative route to that ball, you're probably setting up 1st and 3rd with 2 outs, probably gets out of the inning. So yeah, you look at the final stat line there, and he was phenomenal last night.
Rojas, that's now his 3rd box player in the last 2 nights. What's your kind of like, how long are you doing this Rojas project? He started out hitting okay, or started out hitting horrible, had a little good stretch there, and now he's kind of back to meh. The defense hasn't been great the last 2 nights, which is very rare for him as well.
Yeah, so this was brought up the other night after the game against the Mets, and people are starting to focus on his defense now, right? Because the message coming in is, hey, he can hit 220. It doesn't matter as long as he's so good out there in center field. And you look at defensive runs saved, which has a little bit of a subjective element to it, but people kind of lean into that to evaluate the overall defensive capability of a player. And last year he played a little over 390 innings in center field, and he had 15 defensive runs saved. Entering yesterday, he had 306 innings played in center field, and he was at -4 defensive runs saved. So that's a 19-run jump in almost the same amount of innings year over year. That's not good. They need him to be elite if he's going to hit the way that he has. And I know that he's shown some flashes here and there, but I don't know that it's really enough. I think that he is a guy that is so gifted that at times there may have been a little lack of focus. It's hard to explain. Sometimes things happen. It's baseball, but it's hard to watch this kind of happen on a somewhat consistent basis and not think maybe it's a focus issue. But now I think what you're seeing is a player who's probably trying a little bit too hard. He knows that there's a lot of pressure on him to perform defensively. So like last night, for instance, I think he tried to make something happen and force the issue when he didn't really need to. And so some of these problems are now compounding one another. Here's what I'd say about Johan Rojas. I believe that he is a very useful Major League Baseball player. So this is not me saying, hey, they should move on from him, get rid of this guy, he can't play. I don't feel that. I think that he is someone that can probably get a little bit better offensively, and I do believe in his defensive skills. Right now, though, they're playing so well, it's hard to be critical about anything involving the Phillies. You know, if you're critical, you almost sound like a hater, right? You're like, oh, come on, man, like you're miserable. But I think that though they've been so good, you have to look at this through the lens of trying to win a championship. If that's what this is all about. You got to win the World Series this year. And is Johan Rojas good enough for this team to win a championship? And it's not just Johan Rojas. It's also take a look at what's happening in right field right now. They're not getting the offense that they expect out of Nick Castellanos. And though he's been pretty good, solid, I'll say, defensively in right field while he's been with the Phillies, he's not an elite defender by any stretch of the imagination. So if you're going to get that in right field, and you can't move the contract because he's making $20 million per year through 2026, what do you do here? You know, because you can't have two guys in your outfield basically hitting 200 playing average defense. That's not championship caliber. So either there's improvement from one or both of these guys, or the Phillies are going to have something to evaluate about 2 months from now.
Yeah, I don't want to fast forward to that deadline, but I mean, would you be – it sounds like you're open to maybe trying to move some guys if this continues?
Well, I think that what you have to some degree right now is a little bit of a redundancy in Christian Pache and Johan Rojas. And I like Christian Pache a lot in a minor role. And I like Johan Rojas in his ceiling long term. But that might not mean that they're a fit for the here and now together. And I think that that's the problem. Like right now you have two solid defensive right-handed hitting outfielders who aren't ultra productive offensively. And so I think that that was a part of the issue that they had late in the postseason last year, that redundancy with those two players. And I just think you need a little bit more offensive punch from one of the two. So what does that mean? I mean, is there a world where they upgrade and they bring in another right-handed offensive-minded outfielder to help kind of supplement what's going on out there? Like, I think that that's possible, especially because you consider it. I love Brandon Marsh. I think he's a great dude. I think he's a great teammate. And I think he is a fantastic hitter against right-handed pitching. The problems against left-handed pitching, though, are real. Like, you can't avoid it. You know, as much as everyone wants to say, like, he deserves more opportunities against left-handed pitching, the numbers just really haven't, to this point, supported that. Doesn't mean he can't get better over time. But right now, trying to chase a World Series, they're lacking right-handed punch in the outfield. Whit Merrifield has not been that guy. I just talked about Castellanos' struggles. So to me, yeah, I think that there's a world where you have to decide between Rojas and Pache on this current roster. How do you make it work? I think one of them may not be on this major league roster late this season. I think that that is possible. Not saying it's going to happen. Not saying that these guys can't get better on their own and kind of alleviate the issue internally. But I think it has to at least be on the radar.
Now you put it out there, so it's going to happen. So thanks. Going back to this this rotation, Wheeler and Ranger, and we'll throw Nola in there as well because he's been really good. This whole rotation's been great. One of these guys, the Phillies haven't had a 20-win pitcher since 2010, and it was Roy Halladay.
Yeah. Can
any of these guys break that skid?
Well, I mean, Suarez is certainly on track to do it. You know, Zach has been as good as anybody in the National League, you know, maybe other than Ranger Suarez so far. And Aaron Nola is going to give you innings and pitch deep into games. I'll say that just because of the pace, it is very possible that Suarez does it. I wouldn't bet against one of the three guys potentially arriving there, whether it be this season or in the future. It's tough though, man, especially because the Phillies they track innings, they track workloads. They're very careful with how their starting pitchers are deployed. They want to win the division. They want to win games in the regular season, but there's always a mind on October. Even the past two seasons, when they weren't as polished and the expectations weren't quite so high, they've always really been conservative with how they've utilized their pitching staff. And when you are using that mindfulness and that type of mindset, it's may prevent a couple wins here and there. You might have, quicker hooks. You might have guys out of the game a little bit earlier. So I think that that's something to think about as well.
And let's look at the rest of the rotation. As I mentioned, I want to look into Taijuan Walker a little bit. He got injured that left. I liked how they called it the left big toe contusion. I thought that was kind of funny. So you throw if he going to miss his next start? If he does, you got to throw Turnbull in there. What if Turnbull throws like a no-hitter or something? You have more conversation about who should be in there. Who do you think should be in there? I'll call it a good problem.
It's a great problem to have. There are a lot of teams that would love to have this problem. And it's a little bit tricky. So, I think that these have been talking points for the past few weeks, and I don't think it's a lot different right now. As far as Taijuan Walker goes, look, his first 2 starts against the Padres and Giants, if he just was done after 6 innings, I think everyone would have felt pretty good about it. He ran into some trouble in the 7th in those 2 starts. Should they have pushed him into a 7th inning in his first 2 starts back after being delayed this season? You could make the argument that they shouldn't have put him in that spot. But one of the big things about him is that he can eat up innings and that he can give you length in his starts, and they tried to tap into that. I know he only gave up 1 run against the Marlins last Saturday. I did not think he was particularly impressive in that start. The Marlins can't hit. And they ran themselves into multiple outs early in that game. I was not really impressed by what I saw on Saturday, and I was not impressed by what I saw the other night against the Mets. It's only 4 starts. He could get better. But, look, I mean, I understand why the majority of Phillies fans aren't really excited when his turn in the rotation comes up. So I think that that's one part of it. As far as Spencer Turnbull goes, I mean, he was fantastic for them, and they've taken him out of the mix now, and he's pitched in some kind of weird spots here. He was in mop-up duty his first time out through the bullpen. He came in a tie game and only threw 1 inning against the Marlins on Sunday, which was a little bit weird. You kind of thought, like, once they brought him into a tie game, wouldn't they give him multiple innings? He pitched in that mop-up spot the other night against the Mets. He wasn't that sharp. I think the concern here all along has been if you take Spencer Turnbull out of the rotation in the middle of an all-time heater, right? Like, this guy is an okay major league pitcher, but he's never experienced that type of consistent success. You've sort of disrupted his flow now. So if Taijuan Walker does miss his next start, can you just reasonably assume that Spencer Turnbull is going to come back into the rotation and give you 6 innings of 1-run baseball? Like, I don't know that that's fair to even expect that after you've sort of disrupted that flow that he's been in. Like, if you think back 2 starts ago when Zach Wheeler had the extra rest, right? He was like, I got a 6 day of rest. It kind of broke my rhythm a little bit. That was 1 extra day of rest. Now think about being moved to the bullpen for 2 weeks and only pitching 3 times. So, I think you run the risk of maybe disrupting his flow a little bit. But look, if he does take Taijuan Walker's next start and is really good again, like, at some point the Phillies are going to have to answer this question, because I get Taijuan Walker's contract. He's a good dude. He's a good teammate. The players in that clubhouse really like him. But at the end of the day, like, this is a business and you have to put your best guys out there. And the innings issue, I think, has been alleviated a little bit here over the past couple of weeks. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Phillies are going to have to answer this question at some point. No question.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have. And the Phillies have never had a pitching depth like this that they have now, where they have a guy who could be the ace on the other team in their bullpen. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, look at it this way. Christopher Sanchez has been very good for the Phillies. He was great last season down the stretch. He's been very good this season overall, but he had a couple rough starts mixed in there. And it was like Turnbull versus Walker, right? Like, that was the conversation. But then he kind of like had 2 starts that were a little bit underwhelming. And then people started asking, like, should it be Christopher Sanchez that comes out of the rotation? Like, the standard right now is crazy. And it's really competitive. These guys are competing against one another. It is a great problem to have, as you said.
Yeah, Phillies never had something like this. Something that came out, I think it was this week, maybe last week, whatever. The bat speed stats from StatCast. It's interesting. It's kind of strange. Schwarber ranks 3rd at like 77 miles an hour, which I think everyone kind of expected. What's the good in this? Is there any bad? What does the future look like? Does it matter?
Yeah, I think we're like so early on right now that, like, when you're a baseball writer or you comment on baseball, you kind of want to see things stretch out a little bit before you start to really attach yourself to a stat. Like, certain writers love certain metrics, others kind of dismiss them. This is one I'm not sure about, but like I know a lot of times, like we'll talk about exit velocity, right? And like this is a big one. Like old school people are like, I don't give a damn about exit velocity. You know, if you go 4 for 4 and you hit 4 bloopers over the second baseman's head, that's all I care about. And I can go for that to a degree, like situationally, where you're like, I need you to hit the ball to the other side and move a runner, or like I need you to find a way to grind through an at bat and get on base. Like I don't care about exit velocity and launch angle and things like that in this moment. But over 162 games, like look, the harder you hit the ball, the better it is, the more damage you're going to do. So like I am a supporter of the exit velocity conversation. Bat speed, I guess, might fall into that category, but we've seen some guys that have really good bat speed numbers so far not be very productive. And then we've seen guys who have big time bat speed be awesome. So I think like we need to figure out, like, as it stands alone, it probably isn't the right thing, but like paired up with another metric, it probably gives you a pretty good indication of the usefulness of the stat.
And I was looking at it. Luis Arias is one of the slowest bat speeds in baseball, and all the dude does is hit. And Giancarlo Stanton has the fastest, and he either is strikeout or hits the ball 450 feet. So does it really matter in the end? Unless
I think like right now, like I kind of am like, all right, it's always cool to have more tools, more ways to look at a player and evaluate what they're doing on the field. But like I'll be honest with you, like covering this team, I'm writing about them, I'm talking about them 5 days a week right now. And I have not really dug into the bat speed stuff. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm at on it right now.
All right. Something that that people should be interested in, though, is we're done with the Phillies. Something that people should be interested in is SeatGeek. Phillies are hot right now. Why not go down to the ball? I was there last night. Why not go down there and save some money with SeatGeek? SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot indicating whether purchasing that ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. By using the code Philly Sports Report, you can save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Again, PHILLYSPORTS, or no S, REPORT. Save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Click on the link in the description or the bio to save. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier in the show, but we're coming up on the Philly Sports event at Citizens Bank Park, Saturday, June 1st at 7:15. Phil's Cardinals pregame meetup. We'll have some rally towels, section 301 with the Pandemic Crew. $50 a ticket, Venmo at Jennifer G71 to get your tickets. Coming up on it, so jump on it if you're interested. And something else coming up. I can't believe the Eagles' schedule's out already. I feel like we just lost to the Bucs 2 weeks ago.
Are you a big schedule release guy? Like, did you do your wins and losses and everything, or what?
I mean, I did it content-wise, but I don't really – it doesn't matter until the games are being played because I'm usually wrong anyway. Last year I said I think they were going 13-4, and you know what happened. So let's see if this will work. Here's the schedule for the Eagles. What are you looking at here? Because my first thing I'm looking at, you don't need to go on an airplane after week 12. You have that really weird week 5 bye. And all the NFC East weeks are kind of grouped together, which I don't like.
Yeah, it's an interesting schedule. I mean, with that Brazil game kicking off against the Packers, I mean, you look at that and you say, wow, the Eagles they play one game at Lincoln Financial Field through the first week of October. Like their home schedule is really just not there in the beginning. And then as you go down and you see all of those home games kind of stacked at the end, you just wonder, like I think that the biggest thing for me is like, you look at the way last year ended and you want to say that getting off to a good start matters. Like everyone, when they evaluate a schedule, is going to say getting off to a good start matters. That's not necessarily true. Just look at the 2023 Eagles. They got off to an unbelievable start and it did not matter. But I think with all of the uncertainty around Nick Sirianni and like, is he the right guy? Should he still be here? Is Jalen Hurts the guy that we saw in 22, or is he the guy that was a little bit inconsistent in 23? There's so many questions for this team to answer that I do think that it is important for them those first 4 or 5 weeks to establish that, we're back. And we're not the same team that you saw just totally fold down the stretch last year. And if they do that, I think that they're going to be in a good spot because you are stacking home games at the end of the schedule. You have some tougher opponents. And that's my initial impression. The other one that that jumped off the page at me is this is the first time in I don't know how many years that the Eagles and Cowboys don't play on Sunday Night Football. Both of those games are scheduled for the afternoon time slots, and that's unique because you almost always pencil one of those matchups in.
Yeah, I'm happy about it because I don't like Sunday Night Football. I don't like any primetime games actually because, well, I lose some sleep on a school night. We have to be up 6 o'clock in the morning. But I think one of your Crossing Broad guys wrote about it, how the home games of the season ticket holders and how it really kind of screws them. I'm not a season ticket holder, but still, like the one home game. It's another Monday night game against Kirk, which just God bless Kirk Cousins at this point. It's weird, but those home games at the end, they're all these home games should be wins. Atlanta, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Washington, Dallas, New York, Pittsburgh, and Carolina. Those are all winnable games. I don't have the Eagles losing a home game this year, and I'm sure it'll happen. That Thursday night game against Washington, it just feels like a loss already. But a short week against Dallas. It's got to be. But it's just weird how this schedule. It feels like a pretty easy schedule, but it's hard for me to trust the Eagles after last year, and I feel like that's the same with a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I think it's hard to trust the Eagles a little bit, or at least question the way. And I think that it's not just about the football aspect of it. Like I like what they did in the draft. I think that you now have a professional coaching staff in place in terms of the coordinators. That should help. But is there something in this team's DNA that caused that implosion last year beyond the coordinators, beyond, some of just the momentum and the way that things got away from them? So I think that's the question that this team has to answer. And if they can answer that, and it was a one-off and it was sort of just just all of these different factors coming together, and they prove that they're back and that they're the resilient team that we saw from 2 years ago, that they're tough, then yeah, like you look at the schedule objectively and you have to really like the way it shapes up for them at the end of the year. You talked about that Thursday night football game. You have a short week there coming off of a Dallas game on the road, which you figure is going to be a massive game. Is that a potential letdown spot? Is that a tough spot for them? It is. And then you got to go out west and, you play the Rams. Or I'm sorry, is that game? Yeah, that game's on the road, right? The Rams game?
Yeah, it's Sunday night in LA.
Yeah. So Sunday night in LA is going to be difficult. I have a ton of respect for what Sean McVay does. And I think that we saw that Rams team is on the way back up already. That's a tough spot. And then you got to play Baltimore on the road. That 3-game stretch right there is going to be pretty rough. But if you can survive that and still kind of control your own destiny beyond that game, then I think that those final 5 games of the schedule, they stack up very favorably for the Eagles.
Yeah, I have the Eagles winning those last 5 if that Giants game matters. And 4 of those last 5 are all at home. And you figure a game in Washington is practically a home game because the Eagles take over that stadium. I have the first 4 weeks. I have the Eagles going 2-2. I think they win their first 2. I think they lose those last 2. What do you people don't agree with me with that? What do you kind of think about that kind of take?
Yeah, the game that scares me in those first 4 is actually the first one. I hate the fact that is the Packers. It's a key conference game. When you talk about playoff seeding, whether it be wild card seeding or even if both teams are division winners, which is not a guarantee, right? Like Dallas could obviously win the East. A couple teams in that North division could be better than Green Bay. But the way Green Bay finished last year, the presumption that the Eagles are loaded offensively and have made enough defensive upgrades to potentially win a division, that game could be critically important to the playoff picture. And to not have that game in your home stadium is a tough pill to swallow. I would have much rather seen that been the Browns. There was speculation around that. So that game does give me a little bit of pause. Do I think the Eagles are going to win it? I do. You come back home, I don't, listen, the Falcons look okay. They've got some weapons. Pitts, London, Robinson, Cousins brings a respectable quarterback into the equation. They'll be an interesting team, but that's a game the Eagles should win. I don't buy the Saints. I think they stink. I don't care where that game's played. I think the Eagles beat the Saints. But the Tampa Bay game, right? Like, I would love to tell you, and I think a lot of Eagles fans are probably looking at it this way. They're like, the Eagles are more talented than the Buccaneers. There's no reason that on paper that the Eagles shouldn't go back down there in a revenge spot against a team that ended their season in 21 in embarrassing fashion and ended their season in even more embarrassing fashion last year, to not go down there and punch that team in the mouth. But that stretch of games to start the year is tough. I don't expect the Eagles to go 4-0. And until they can go down there and play physically with the Buccaneers, like, I'm not going to pick them to do it. So I could see a loss in that game. I'll say they go 3-1 that first block.
I just never feel good in New Orleans. I can't tell you the last time the Eagles won a game in New Orleans. And that Bucks game, you mentioned they want to go down there and get their revenge. Usually when we see a Philadelphia team want to get their revenge, they usually get their, smashed. So I think that is kind of what's going to happen. And the thing with Kirk Monday night is primetime Kirk might be like Eagles Sam Bradford.
Yeah.
Which is tough, and it's always in Philadelphia too, which is sad. But
yeah, I mean, look, you were talking about the Eagles not winning in New Orleans. I mean, yeah, I can't tell you the last time that they actually went down there and won a game, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm actually trying to, as we're talking, go back and scroll through this. It looks to me like the 2000 season might be the answer to that.
2000?
Let's see here.
So
Philadelphia, you know what? Here we go. 2007, the Eagles won a game 38-23. I don't remember that, to be perfectly honest.
What was the date of that? Was I alive?
December 23rd, 2007. The Eagles beat the Saints on the road 2 days before Christmas, 38-23.
All right, I was about 2 months old the last time the Eagles won a game in New Orleans.
There you go. Yeah, Donovan McNabb, Greg Lewis, Reggie Brown, Carell Buckhalter. That I don't recall that game. The 07 season was not a real memorable one for the Eagles. I will say that. So.
Oh, there you go. So it's been since I was 2 months old.
Yeah, so good point by you. Good call out. So maybe that one is a little bit harder than I'm giving it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints are – Derek Carr is a very good name. Do you have a prediction on what the full-out record will be now? I know it's extremely early. We don't know what this defense personnel may look like just yet, but what do you got?
Yeah, I guess. Listen, I mean, I think when I talk about the Phillies, I'm fairly objective. I grew up a huge Phillies fan. I'm from the area, but I have been covering that team for the last 6 seasons now. And as you do that, like, certainly I want them to win. All my friends are Phillies fans. I grew up as one. My family are Phillies fans. But, like, you bring a certain level of objectivity to it. Like, you still have to call them out when they're not playing well. You still have to evaluate what you think. Like, I picked the Braves to win the division series last year. I picked the Braves to win the East coming in. Like, I don't have like the red colored pom poms all the time with the Phillies. But
you cover the team, so it makes sense.
And like, so you kind of expect that. But with the Eagles, man, like, I'm nuts. Like, I'm a big time Eagles fan, and I probably I probably always look at them a little bit more favorably. I probably do have the green colored glasses on, as they say. But I think that this is a 12-5 team. I think the floor is probably 10 wins. Like, I would be stunned if they won fewer than 10 games. And if they do, I certainly think they will have a new head coach next season. But when I look at this schedule, team has something to prove. I do believe in Jalen Hurts. And you just look at the weapons that he has. You figure that Kellen Moore has to come in here and find a way to unlock this offense and unlock the talent on this offense. So yeah, I think that this is probably a 12-win team. Do I haven't gotten to the Super Bowl? I don't know who is, but I'm not picking the Eagles to win the NFC. But I do think that they're going to be in the mix.
Yeah, I think the Eagles. I have them 12-5 as well, with losses in New Orleans, Tampa, Cincinnati, in Dallas, and in Baltimore. So I don't have them losing a home game because I like this home schedule.
I could go for that. That's a pretty interesting mix, right? Because if they go 8-0 on the road, they technically have 9 home games with the Brazil game. So you're saying 8-0, but then 4-5 on the road. Is that right? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I think that that's pretty reasonable. When you look at that road schedule, especially, like, I think they split with Washington. They always struggle with the Commanders. So I think a split does happen there, whether it's the home or the road game. And that Washington team's a little bit better. I think that Rams game out west is tough. And certainly the Baltimore game the following week is very difficult. I would pick them to lose that as well. And then, as we both kind of agreed, there's probably some issues there between week 3 and 4, maybe at least a loss there. So I'm with you on that.
Some other issues that have been going around with the Eagles is we got a new podcast. Everyone loves when players make their own podcasts. It's always the best thing in the world. I want to start. It's the Djax Shady. It's the worst name for a podcast. The 2510 show. That's horrible. They got to come up with something better than that. They dug into. We'll start with the Chip. They dug into Chip Kelly a little bit. I'll play the video. I hope the sound works. Here we go. It's this one.
Don't tell no lie about me, and I won't tell truths about you.
Bro, you really released me off of allegations, bro. And like that was a coward ass move.
You didn't send me to Buffalo because you thought it was the best move for your team. You sent me here to die.
I never really able to get the benefit of the doubt that I deserve, bro. And it was like all off of Chip Kelly.
I never met a coach that was uncomfortable with dealing with black players.
Do you remember that time he made Michael Vick cry?
And I remember he's saying, bro, I cry more with dealing with Chip Kelly and the Eagles, bro, than I did in prison.
Jay Peters, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear Chip Kelly?
Bullshit ass guy, man.
All lies will be.
All right, so we'll try and keep this a little light since we'll call it a kids show. We'll go into something a little more deeper after this. I wasn't around for the Chip years. I didn't get to experience them, thank God. I kind of got into it during the first Doug season, 2016. Not good.
No. Look, Andy Reid was really good here for a long time. At the end of 2012, though, it was time to move on. I think most people would agree with that. Obviously, he's a great coach. He's had great success since he's left here. But it was probably time for Andy and this organization. And they felt like they had underachieved those final 2 years. And even in 2010, the Eagles had it all lined up. It looked like the Eagles could make a Super Bowl run that year with Vic. He was playing at MVP level. They lost at home in the first round to Green Bay. So there were a few seasons of disappointment. I think the Eagles felt like they were in a place where they really needed to make a splash. They felt stagnant. Chip Kelly at the time was just this super innovative guy. He was so fun to watch at Oregon. Those offenses were phenomenal. They were lightning quick. They got on the ball fast. They put up crazy amounts of points. And he was widely regarded around college and into the pro ranks as somebody that you really wanted to engineer your offensive attack. So when he came here, people were amped up. And you saw, Shady, Deshaun, Macklin with Vic. And you're like, he has a chance to light it up here. And they did some really good things in 2013. It ended prematurely. They lost at home to the Saints that year in the first round. But there was a lot of optimism about, there's a damn Saints again. There was a lot of optimism, though, about what they were going to accomplish with him. But by 2014, I think the act really started to wear thin. And, obviously Deshaun leaves, LaShawn leaves. And it became about control, I think, with Chip Kelly. If you weren't going to do everything that I wanted you to do in the exact fashion that I wanted you to do it, and both of those guys talked about that on the podcast, then he was going to get rid of you. And he brought in a lot of Oregon guys, many of which could not play. And it was like he was just trying to struggle for control and power. And I think a lot of the goodwill that he built early on gave him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Like Jeff Lurie couldn't step in right away and be like, no, this is the wrong thing to do. I think Jeff Lurie looked at the 2013 season and said, wow, we're really turning this thing around. And so he allowed Chip to maybe make some decisions that they would not have allowed a head coach to dictate now or ever again. And so I think when you listen to those two guys, is there a little bit of bitterness there? Yeah. Did they do everything the right way? No, they did not. I think that you can criticize to some degree each of those players, but they were so explosive and they were so good that it was really hard in the moment to say, like, you just released Deshaun Jackson. You traded LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso. I mean, not even the most blindly loyal Eagles fan could look at those moves and say that makes a lot of sense. Or we're getting back Kiko Alonso. Let's roll. It made no sense. And while you might just look at those two guys and say that it's sour grapes, like when they pick up the phone and they start calling former teammates, highly respected, well-regarded former teammates, and those are the answers you get, on top of what the Eagles have put out there in recent years, like everyone knows that Chip Kelly is not welcome around NovaCare or Lincoln Financial Field. I think it's pretty clear that the guy was an idiot and a power-hungry one at that. And, he went out to UCLA. Everybody said, he's back in the Pac-12. He's back in the West Coast where he knows how to really recruit star players. Watch out for the Bruins. He was there multiple years, and they couldn't do a damn thing. And that's why he's the offensive coordinator now in Ohio State. Is he a fraud? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe he'll destroy that Ohio State program too, which is nice because I don't like Ohio. It's tough, and this is another tough story that I'll share We'll try and keep it a little light. But this one feels on brand with Crossing Broad too. A little bit. Here we go.
I'm saying this to say now, in 2024, 11 years later, I got a call in 2013 from Drew, and they're saying some reporter out in New Jersey basically brought this article up, and he wrote this long story about basically 2008 or 2009. One of my childhood friends I grew up with, he went to jail for murder. When he actually got convicted for murder, you know, that's my brother. I'm not going to turn my back on him. Like, I'm going to help him in any situation. So I end up getting him a lawyer.
Okay.
And I got him a lawyer, and he beat the case. I went to go pick him up. Me, my cousin, Spody, and a few of my boys, we went downtown and picked him up from the county jail. We took a picture, and the picture was dug up. This report basically like how I'm basically supporting thugs and I'm supporting murderers, and basically like I'm out here gang banging in my crowd. They start picking and chewing. And then Drew was telling me like they're releasing you because of this. I'm like, so you finna tell me they releasing me just because I picked up my boy to beat murder? Like, I wasn't a convicted felon. I ain't went to jail. I ain't never been to jail. Like, bro, they're saying I'm a thug. I'm a hoodlum. To me, I just didn't really understand the picture they painted on me. And it was like, really sitting back now, it was like, bro, you really released me off of allegations, bro.
Yeah, this story was a big deal when it came out. Obviously Elliott was tied to that article and was integral in writing it. But as Kevin Kincaid on Crossing Broad wrote 4 days ago, he actually did a deep dive looking back at that story. And if you're interested in it and what is going on here, especially with the way that Elliott has been sort of attacked here in recent days, I highly recommend that you read it. I think it's pretty measured. It's pretty detailed, thoughtful, talking about, how was Elliott wrong? What did he do? I don't tend to comment on, other media guys, the way that maybe Kevin does, who runs Crossing Broad, and the way that Kyle Scott used to when he owned the site. But I will say this, Elliott did not write that story alone. There was somebody else that had a byline on the story. He has relatively been just sort of nobody saying anything about the other guy. It's all falling on Elliott. Story ran 10 years ago. People all of a sudden want WIP to fire the guy. Like they want, I don't know. It's complicated. Elliott at that point is a young reporter. You're trying to stand out. Like, as there's a million podcasts, there's a million different sports websites, a million different sports blogs. And you're trying to carve out your own thing, your own voice. And it's super competitive, right? Like Elliott got information and Elliott's co-writer got information and they decided to move forward with it. And you can talk about why they were given that information and was it in good faith and all of those things. But I don't know that it's entirely fair 10 years after the fact to just, berate the guy and just go after him to the degree that people have. And listen, Elliott is not for everyone. I always give Elliott credit, man. He builds up a huge social media following. He gets a ton of engagement on his tweets and on his social media presence. He has a lot of, I think, takes that are disingenuous. I think a lot of his takes are simply to get a reaction. But he, to his credit, does a good job of defending and supporting them, even if you're infuriated as you listen to him do it. So there is a skill in that. So there's a lot of different layers that you can kind of dive into with Elliott. But the thing that I don't love is just, 10 years later to go after the guy. Everyone remembers the story. So to go after him now because there was a podcast from two former players bringing it up again, I don't know. I don't know if that's entirely fair, but it's a very complicated issue, and those guys have legitimate rights too. So, I would say that.
Well, as a guy who doesn't have much knowledge or should even be speaking on it anyway, either, the fact that he thinks the Eagles now released him on about that, I don't find that to be true. I don't know about you, but I'm not really fully buying in that the gang ties is the reason that he was released by the Eagles. I just think that was part of Chip Kelly's cutting board era.
I tend to agree. I mean, I think that what that ultimately was to some level was this is a good way to rationalize it publicly to a fan base and to an industry that otherwise does not understand on paper this move. So this gives us something to kind of fall on and say, listen, we didn't put it out there, but that report is true, kind of like that, like without saying it, kind of being like, well, the report's there, so it makes it a little easier to tolerate the move, because really, I think it was more about Chip wanted his guys. Chip wanted to control who was there. Chip didn't want any pushback. He didn't want any questions. He just wanted to say, like, this is my system. I'm the smartest guy in the league. Doesn't matter to some degree who I put out there, it'll get taken care of. And, as that proved over time, that was totally not the case.
Something that is the case, though, is you can get the best gear and stuff on FOCO. Good way to segment into an ad. I feel like I'm getting better and better at going into advertisements. These shows go on. FOCO, real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description. To save 20% off. Link in the description or bio. 10% off any purchase at FOCO. A lot of people are still wearing the overalls at the ballpark. They're still I have a pair. I was sent one from FOCO. I wore it for Game 6 and 7 of the NLCS. I refuse to wear it again. But they have a lot of people. There's still a lot of people rocking with the ballpark. And I thought people would be steered away from it after what happened last year. But, hey, people are rocking them.
It's good to see some people out there haven't totally turned on the chief vibes officer and Garrett Stubbs. It's good to see.
Yeah, I can't turn on my fellow member of my tribe, so I can't do that just yet. Last thing, we're coming up on the hour. We got more LeBron to the Sixers stuff. After how many years ago was this? 5, 6?
Yeah, it's been about 5 or 6 years now. Yeah.
Let's finish the process. So LeBron to Philly, it's kind of like if you draft Bronny, you get LeBron. I think Sixers have the 16th pick. Is there a possibility that this is even happening, or should once again for like 5 or 6 years ago to be shut up?
I don't think people should shut up. It's fun to talk about. I mean, he's the second best player of all time. I mean, maybe some people even think he's the best player of all time. I mean, he's unbelievable. And it's fun to talk about, right? Like, there have been many dumber conversations that we've had in this city. There's no question about that. And look, I mean, my perspective on the Sixers, I just told you, I'm all in on the Eagles. I'm super big time Eagles fan. I'm not Mr. 76er. I root for him. I want him to do well, but I don't live and die by it. I would just say this team is sort of at a crossroads here, right? And I think that everybody would agree with this. They have not been good enough. The playoff losses have been just really deflating year over year over year. How much more time does Joel Embiid have? He's still such a dominant player. You're never going to get equal value back for him in any type of trade. So you figure, all right, we've got Joel. He's here. We have to commit to that. You have Tyrese Maxey, who is a stud. What is the best path forward for this team in 24-25? And, is that Paul George in his mid-30s? Is that going to be the answer? Is that going to get you over the hump? Because time's running out. How much more time do you have with Joel Embiid in his prime to do this? And so you can make an argument that LeBron's on his way down and he had Anthony Davis and they couldn't get it done, but they didn't have that third player, that third star player in the mix. So is there some wisdom in trying to do that? Maybe. Is it realistic? Probably not. But if I had the opportunity to do it, and I don't know where you land on this, I'd almost say, what the hell? Why not, man? Why not? And that's kind of where I would fall on it at this point, because I don't see a better alternative path forward. And I don't know that Daryl Morey is really capable of doing anything other than the most obvious thing. And, I think he's a smart guy, and I think he's an okay GM, but I don't know that he has a ton of flexibility to build this team that makes them a true contender in 1 year. I don't see another path, really.
Daryl Morey was brought in to kind of reorganize this team and build a championship. Well, he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah.
He's had so many years to do it, and every move that he has made has not worked. The best thing he did was get Ben Simmons out of Philadelphia, and he brought in James Harden, which brought another problem.
Yeah, and then the best thing he did was get James Harden out of here. And
the best thing he's done is get his moves out of the city. But the trade deadline acquisitions have never worked out. Buddy Hield was absolutely horrendous until the second quarter of Game 6. I liked the campaign, but in the moment I didn't, because I think Pat Bev added a lot to this team, who I no longer have respect for. But I just don't. When Daryl Morey is set on something, and it sounds like he is set on Paul George, he doesn't maneuver away from it. He was unable to bring a championship roster around a prime James Harden. He hasn't been able to build anything yet, and he's been brought here to build that, and he hasn't done it yet. So, do we trust Daryl? No, I don't.
Yeah, I would say that I don't think he's incapable of doing it, but he hasn't given you a reason to necessarily believe that he can, if that makes sense. And I think that from just a macro perspective at the highest level with the Sixers, I would say this. Like, there is a little bit of a problem with how people view them. You know, it's just this, you kind of roll your eyes right now when you're talking about them. Like, the thing this year was like, oh, it's refreshing. It's not the James Harden story anymore. They're younger. They're more athletic. Maxi's becoming a star. This team may not be a championship contender, but they're different. And like, I know that they were kind of applauded for the fight they showed against the Knicks. Like, I don't think that was a rollover and die series by the Sixers, but at the same time, like, what are we talking about? Like, you lost in 6 games to the Knicks. Like, the Knicks aren't an all-time team here. You know, they weren't the Celtics this year. So I just think that there's like this Sixers fatigue. And I think one of the best things possible would be to have them make a move that sort of rejuvenates the fan base. But you just said it. It looks like the obvious move is going to be Paul George, and I would be surprised if they could find a creative way to do anything meaningful that's not that. And I don't know how
Paul George is in his mid-30s, and his last 3 playoffs they've been horrible, for lack of better word. He's been terrible in the playoffs, and you need a guy to step up in the playoffs because you're never going to have a fully healthy Embiid. And Maxey, I don't think yet it can be your number one guy. And Paul George averages what, like 5 points in playoff? How is that going to help?
Well, think about how you view all the teams right now. Like, you're all in on the Phillies. Like, oh, Phillies, they could win the World Series this year. The Eagles, they were miserable at the end of last season, but everyone's like, Jalen Hurts is the guy. Like, they can win. They could bounce back. They could win 12 games. They could contend for an NFC title. Like, most people are back in on the Eagles. The Flyers, like, they seem to be going in the right direction. The Sixers kind of feels like it's a dead end right now, and that's a problem that they've got to figure out.
I feel like that is a big thing with the upper management of these teams. Like, the Phillies I've met him, a great owner in John Middleton, who's a genuine person, and they have Dave Dombrowski running the show, who has built a World Series roster. The Sixers, of course, or the Eagles, sorry, have Howie Roseman, who is, the man, and Jeffrey Lurie at the top as well. The Flyers, their new front office is great. They have a great dude in Dan Hilferty. There's a few other guys that are Danny Briere and Keith Jones are great. The Sixers, Josh Harris owns 5 teams. Like, how can you connect with a guy like that? It's just it's tough right now for the Sixers.
It absolutely is, especially when you're watching the NFL draft and you see him down there in the command center with the Washington draft, right? And you're like, oh man, this guy's just not all in. He's not all in.
No, he's not
us. Yeah.
No.
For sure.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for coming on, Bob. Means a lot. Where can people find your stuff?
So right now you can read me occasionally, usually on the weekends at Crossing Broad, doing some Phillies coverage for them. We have a podcast that you can get on pretty much any big-time podcast platform, Crossed Up, a Phillies podcast. And then you can check out a weekly newsletter that I send out on the Phillies. Comes to your mailbox every morning on Friday and Monday. It's free, and you can get that at redoctoberphilly.com.
There you go. Bob, thank you very much again. Thank you to SeatGeek and Foco for sponsoring Philly Sports Game on June 1st, Saturday, 7:15. Venmo at Jen4G71, $50 per ticket. Follow us on all social media. If you ever miss a live Philly sports show, you can listen on all podcast apps or watch on YouTube. Bob, thank you again. We'll see you guys next week. Go Phils.
Swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone. Yes! It is bedlam at the bank. Look at the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way rock the baby to sleep and slam dunk. And the doctor made a sensational play. In front, the front, and they score!